Thank you so much, Susie, for being here today. I think your story is very interesting because it is very unusual. You were separated from your parents. We're going to talk about that. But I wonder if you would talk about what your pre-war life in Germany was like.
Yeah. You saw the picture at the beginning. That was my mom and dad and my two brothers. And life was very good in 1933 when Hitler first came into power. My father had a nice store, and he made a good living for us, and we lived in a nice house. But then all of a sudden things changed.
What kind of store did he have?
He had a linen store. And it was a good linen store, and he made a good living for us. But all of a sudden, when Hitler came into power, there was the people collaborated with the Nazis, and they boycotted lots of people's businesses. And so they boycotted my father's store. And so, and after a while, he didn't have any customers, so he lost his making living, and he had to close his store. So that's really the very first thing that I remember that happened. The next thing that I remember, I was going to go to public school, and I was really excited to go to public school. And I was going to go to first grade, and I was so happy to be going to first grade. But as soon as I started school, things started to change because the kids were making fun of me, and I couldn't figure it out. I was a little kid, and I didn't know about anti-Semitism, and I didn't know about hatred and injustice. And the teacher was reading a book to us, and it was called Der Giftpilz, which means a poison mushroom. It was a picture story book. And she was teaching the kids in first grade that Jewish children were poison mushrooms. So every day I didn't told my mother I didn't want to go to school, but she said, you have to go to school. But one day I was really extremely happy. You know what happened? There was a law in Germany, and it said that Jewish children aren't allowed to go to public school. And I tell you, I was really happy about that. So I didn't have to go to school anymore. But our parents...
Did you go to Jewish school after that?
It wasn't really a Jewish school, but let me just explain how it
Sure.
worked. Because all of the people in our town, they, all the Jewish people, they wanted their kids to have an education, so they hired one Jewish teacher. And he didn't teach us anything about religion or anything about Judaism, but this Jewish teacher had to teach all of the kids all the Jewish kids. And so the first grade was sitting like in the first row, in the second grade in the second row, third grade in the third row, all the way to the 10th grade. And this teacher taught us everything: geometry, geology, how to write and how to read. And he had really a big job, but everybody, all the Jewish kids were happy because nobody called him a dirty Jew anymore.
Can I ask, backing up a little, did you have non-Jewish friends at this time or before this time? And did they stick with you?
Yeah, I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. But I do want to tell you one story about a non-Jewish girl. I don't remember her being my friend. Can I just tell you that story? My mother used to send me to the grocery store, and she used to say to me, buy a loaf of bread or get some milk. And here was this little kid. I was really very proud to be going to the grocery store. So this is where we lived, like here, and at the very end of the auditorium is where the grocery store is, and where all of our audience today is a park. And so in order to get to the grocery store, I could walk through the park and get to the other side of the grocery store. So on one day I had my pfennig in my hand. This was the German money. And I walked down the stairs into the park, and the gatekeeper started screaming at me. And he said, hey, you girl, you can't go through the park anymore. And I was this little kid, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't go through the park. So I ran home. I was really scared, and I ran home and I told my mother, and she told me not to walk through the park anymore. Of course, she didn't tell me what was going on in Germany at that time because she wanted to spare me, and she probably figured that this whole thing was going to blow over, all of this hatred and anti-Semitism. So the next time she sent me to the store, I got to the steps. And I had to say, if I wanted to go to the grocery store over there, I would have to go all the way down the street, go all the way up here, and go all the way around. So the audience probably can guess already what I decided to do. I stood there. I said to myself, I'm really very tired. So I started to walk through the park. And the gatekeeper came out. And then he had a daughter. And this is, I'm trying to answer your question. She was just about my age, maybe a drop older, and maybe she had gone to school with me. I just don't remember exactly. And she saw her father throwing rocks at me because he was really angry because he had told me not to go through the park anymore. And so he called me all kinds of horrible names. And he started to throw rocks at me, and she saw this girl who had been my friend maybe, but I'm not sure. This little girl was learning from her father about hatred and about anti-Semitism. He was her role model, and I guess she figured if he's doing it, so she would do it too. So I remember this part of that girl, but I was young and I don't remember those little kids anymore.
And did you recount this to your mother?
Oh yeah, and I tell you, I never walked through that park again.
And so your mother, at this point, your mother worked with your father, is that correct? They ran the store together until they had to sell the store, or did she stay at home?
Yeah, she stayed at home and took care of us, yeah.
So how did your parents react to all of this, to the anti-Semitism, to the sudden closing of their business, to the fact that your father lost his livelihood? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think I heard them talking at home, and my mother always said, let's get out of Germany. And the place that she wanted to go to was the United States because she had heard this was the greatest country in the world. And my father, he wasn't in such a hurry because he thought maybe it was going to blow over. And this was pretty much what was going on in Germany at the time. You know, a lot of German Jews, they didn't want to leave because they were Germans first and Jews second. So they figured, well, maybe things are going to get better. But it didn't. It really didn't get better.
Your father was originally born in Poland, is that correct?
Yes.
But he assimilated quite easily to German society.
Yes, he did. Yeah, but we spoke only German in our house. I never learned anything about anything Polish, and I never did get to meet my grandparents that lived in Poland.
And so up until this point, the anti-Semitism is there. Then in November of 1938, Kristallnacht happens. Can you describe that evening for me?
Yeah. My brother, the older one, not the baby, but the older one, we slept in the same bedroom together. And it was around 11 o'clock, and we were really very excited because the next day was going to be November the 10th, my mother's birthday. And so we were still up at 11 o'clock, and we were talking, and just then some bricks and rocks were being thrown through our bedroom window. And my brother was a year younger than I am, and he is still a year younger than I am, and he pulled himself up. He had to pull himself up to the windowsill. I remember, like, he did a push-up, and he looked outside to see what was happening and who was throwing the bricks and rocks through the window. And he told me, Susi, that's how you pronounce it in German, Susi, it is our neighbors that are throwing the bricks and rocks through the window. And there was a civil policeman on the side of the crowd, and he was standing like this, and he didn't do anything to stop the crowd.
And at this point, your your mom had another child, a baby.
Yeah, the baby was Ernest, and the one that you saw, and he was in his crib. He was in his crib, and we found out. Anyway, we were really scared when that happened, so we ran across the hall to our parents' bedroom, and a rock had just fallen on top of the baby, Ernest's hand, but he was okay. And so we were huddling there together trying to decide what to do. And just then, the crowd had uprooted a telephone pole, and they smashed it through our front door. And their objective really was to get to the rabbi's apartment. We lived on the first floor. The rabbi lived on the second floor. And a non-Jewish family lived on the third floor. And then on top was an attic. So my father said, well, let's go and hide up in the attic until this whole thing blows over. But in the meantime, these people were going through our apartment with this pole, and they ransacked some of our things. I don't remember exactly what they took, what they broke, I don't know. But their objective was to get to the rabbi's apartment. And they destroyed most of his artifacts, and they destroyed his books, and I don't know what other things they destroyed. So anyway, we got up to the attic, and there the rabbi's family was already there.
Without the rabbi?
Without the rabbi.
And what about your father?
Okay, let me just tell you what my father. Let me just tell you about the rabbi and tell you about my father a second. Is that okay? Okay, when we got up there, the rabbi wasn't there, and I looked out the window, and the rabbi was standing on his veranda. He had a veranda because he was the rabbi of the town. So he had the veranda, and he was standing on the veranda, and two SS men were holding him like this, and a third one came and cut off his beard. And then, so he wasn't up in the attic. And my father wasn't up in the attic, and the reason he was not in the attic is because later on I found out that they arrested all the Jewish men in our town and put them in jail. But my father came back. The rabbi didn't come back, but my father came back to the attic, and at the time I was really very happy, but I wasn't quite sure why they let him out of jail. And later on I found out I really should have talked to my father when I was an adult person to get all of the details. And I'm advising to you in the audience, if you have parents or grandparents, ask them all the things that you need to know, because after they pass away, it's too late. But anyway, the part that I know about my father, my brother and I figured this out. Either my father got out of jail because he used to play chess with the mayor of the town, and maybe the mayor had some kind of feelings for him, and I'm not sure. Or because my father was Polish, and at that time, Hitler said he was going to take over all of Europe, and at that time they hadn't taken over Poland yet. So, and he was Polish, and maybe because he was Polish, they didn't put him in jail. But I'm not sure of the reason for it. So anyway, he came up to the attic.
So historically, in October of 1938, which precipitated Kristallnacht, German Jews of Polish origin were put out of Germany. And it's amazing your father that he was not put out of Germany and back into Poland. My guess is the former and not the latter, that there was a relationship with, that the mayor took pity on him. Because my guess is that I'm surmising that it wouldn't have happened otherwise.
I'm glad to hear that. Because I really was never sure, yeah.
I think it's hard to know. And, we have the saying that we always try to, there's no rhyme or reason to what the Nazis were thinking, because it was never the same, that they never did the same thing twice. So,
yeah.
So you were in the attic for. Describe what happened in the attic.
Well, I'm not sure, maybe it was 3 or 4 days or something like that. And it was November, and the town had, and my father and I guess all the people in our building had put apples up in the attic because it was just right after the apple picking season. So there were like piles of apples on the floor. And so we ate them. We played the rabbi's kids, and my brother and I, we played with them. We made abakai out of them. We counted them, and we made games out of them. So we were children, and we didn't realize the consequences of what was going to happen, after that.
And do you think part of that is because your parents, your mother, and the rabbi's wife did the best thing they could, which is really keep you from understanding what was going on?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I remember, there's one thing maybe some of the kids in the audience want to know about this. My father had all of his savings, and he didn't have it in the bank. He had it under the mattress. And so before we ran up to the attic, he took the money out and he made me wear it in my underwear. And I remember we couldn't go to the bathroom. So when we were up there, so the money got really wet. But I'm telling you this for a reason, because the money came in very handy. Later on, we dried it all out, and I'll tell you later on what happened to that money. Yeah.
So after at one point you decide it's safe to go back downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
What condition did you find your apartment?
This is the part that I don't remember. I do not remember. I know historically that the Jews had to go. Can you tell the audience what happened with that? I don't know because I was little. I don't remember. I don't remember, but we did go back to the apartment, and they did the best that they could for us to live there. But my father and mother at that time, like all of the Jews in Germany, they didn't want to stay in Germany anymore. I mean, that Kristallnacht woke everybody up, and Hitler said, "Get out, get out." That was what he said to everybody. So my father and mother, like most of the people, tried to get out.
Did you have family living in the United States?
Yes, I did.
You
Yes.
did?
My father had a cousin who had a pickle factory in Brooklyn. And he tried to get in touch with her, and she did everything she could to get papers and affidavits for him, for the family, but it wasn't enough.
Right. It was quite a difficult process, and
Yeah.
she had to really be able to support a family of 4, right?
5.
5.
Yeah.
Oh, right. The baby. I forgot
Yeah,
about the baby.
yeah, well-
Yes. So what did your parents do after Kristallnacht then?
Okay, so my father had heard about this lady who lived in France, and she was smuggling children across the border into France. And she was pretending that these children were her children. And she had these passports for her own children, and somehow I guess they took our picture and put it in the passports.
And let me just remind the audience that at this point, Germany has not occupied France because it's still 1939.
No, this is let's see, it was 1939. I'm trying to remember the month. Oh, I think it was August 1939, yeah.
You were smuggled into Paris.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? Do you remember?
Yeah, we had a second cousin who had a nice little apartment in the Place de la Vendôme, and he was a young man, like you, a young guy, he had these 2 children in his little apartment, and so he had to go to work, and so he told us to stay in the apartment, and my brother, he was a curious one, he was like 7.5, And he decided he wasn't going to stay in the apartment all day and wait for him to come home. So he used to go out of the apartment, sneak into the metro in Paris, go all over and, go under the stile, go all over Paris, come back before the cousin or the third cousin came back. And so this went on for 2 weeks, and this man couldn't keep us anymore. So he found organizations, and I don't know if at that time it was the Highest or the Oze or the Quakers, all of those people. I'm thankful to those 3 organizations because they helped my brother and me through our whole time while we were separated from our parents. And so they found a place for us to live on the outskirts of Paris.
And so you went to live in the outskirts of Paris, and how long were you there?
Well, it was 1940, and in May of 1940, we used to look out the window and we used to see airplanes flying by, and I think it was the German airplanes, and they were dropping bombs, not on Paris, but on the outskirts, and we could see them. And I remember it looked like the 4th of July. And so one day we were going to Paris, and I don't know what made my brother and me be in Paris. I just don't remember. But we were there, and it was I think in May of 1940. That's when the Nazis, the German army came into Paris, and we were there. And not only the Jews, but many, many people in Paris were frightened, and they wanted to run out of Paris. And so a lot of them went to the south, to Vichy, and a lot of people went west. And there's this town, maybe the people here in the audience know, it's about 40 miles from Paris, and it has a palace in it. Does anybody know what the name of that town is? I heard it, Versailles. You're right. Whoever said it, you're absolutely right. There's this big palace there, and a lot of people went. And so, I don't know, I think 2 nuns. I don't know, we were just these 2 children. Then we had nothing to do with the family that was taking care of us. We were just these 2 children marching. There were people going in cars. There were people going on horseback, on bicycles, and walking just to get out of Paris. And so we ended up in Versailles. A lot of people ended up there. And the mayor of the town, I guess he was really shocked. He didn't know what to do with all these people. So guess what? The biggest house in Versailles was the palace. So they had to put us up someplace. And so I don't know how many of you, have you been to there? There are these beautiful gardens, and there's this palace, and all way on the other side, there was this big pile of hay. It was as high as the ceiling, I think. And so they gave us burlap bags, and each one of us took one of the burlap bags, and we filled it up with straw and the hay. And then we tied it up with a string, and that was our mattress. And so the biggest room in the palace, does anybody know what the biggest room in the palace is? Aha, right. Yeah, the Hall of Mirrors. And so in the Hall of Mirrors, maybe it's like twice as long, it's not much wider than, it's twice as long as this auditorium. And there were mirrors and chandeliers hanging down and on the side. And so we put our little mattresses next to each other. And so the whole Hall of Mirrors was filled with mattresses, and we were sleeping there.
That must have been surreal.
Yeah, it was surreal.
And meanwhile, what is going on with your family back in Germany?
Yeah. Well, we kept on writing to them, and we didn't really hear anything from them. I didn't know what had happened to them.
So you didn't know what was going on?
No.
So after you are in Versailles, what happens then?
Okay, well, can I tell you about one incident that happened in Versailles? Well, you'll think this is really interesting. Can I tell it to you? Okay. So the Nazis didn't decide to just stay in Paris. Guess where they went? They came to Versailles, right? And I remember I could hear the boots. It was like a caravan of boots and tanks and cars, and you could hear them from far away. And they stopped in front of the palace. And the mayor of the town was there, and this high official at the beginning of the caravan came out. I don't know if he was a general or a mayor, or I don't know. Anyway, he came out, and he was this tall. And he came out, and they wanted to talk to each other. So the mayor of the town didn't know how to speak any French. I'm sorry. The mayor of the town didn't know how to speak any German, and the Nazi officer didn't know any French. And so someone in the crowd said, "Oh, there's this little girl in the palace. She knows how to speak German." So guess who it was? Yes? So anyway, I'm 10 years old by then. Yeah, 10 years old. And so I come out, and the officer is really this tall. And so they started talking to each other, and I don't remember what they talked about. Anyway, at the end of the conversation, the Nazi officer bends down to me and he says to me, "Little girl, how come you know how to speak German so well?" So I said to him, "The schools in France are really good, and I learned how to speak German." Okay. Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
So you're at one point you're moved again.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. What happened next? I mean, so did you stay there? Did everybody leave? I mean, you just kind of left us hanging.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I don't know if you on the map that we talked that you saw before. There was this white line in the middle of France, and like on the on the western coast, it went up like this. So that part the Nazis gave to France and said that's going to be the unoccupied zone. So a lot of people wanted to go into the unoccupied zone, and you saw Vichy, which was in that part of the unoccupied zone. A lot of people went down there, and there was a Chateau de Morel in a little town of Brou-Vernay, and it was a village, and so somehow or other there I don't know how we got there, but it was run by the OSE, the Au Secours des Enfants, one of the organizations that was helping lost children from all over, and they put them into this, and it was an old castle. And so in this castle, we ended up in this castle in the unoccupied zone. And
let's just be clear: the unoccupied zone, or Vichy, was really run by a Nazi collaborative government.
Yeah, Pétain, and he was collaborating with the Nazis. Anyway, but it was better than living in the occupied zone. And when I was a little kid, we didn't see any soldiers in Brou-Vernay, so they left us alone in Brou-Vernay. But in the meantime, I was in Brou-Vernay, and I didn't hear anything from my parents.
Still no word.
Yeah.
And what was it like? What was it like at the chateau?
Yeah, I wrote a diary.
You did write a diary. This is true.
Yeah, she's the one that had it translated for me, and I never wanted to. We had a little talk before, and I never wanted to read it because it was so childish. And she was going to ask me some questions about the diary. And I said, "I don't remember the diary, but ask me something about the diary, and then I'll see if I remember it."
Well, describe what it was like first of all, you were, again, with Joseph the whole time.
Yes.
And how was he doing?
Well, he was curious as ever. And he was in the same chateau, but all the boys were on one side, and the girls were on the other side of the chateau.
Did you feel a sense of relief having landed in the chateau and being there?
Yeah, but I had a sense of relief, but I was missing my parents, and I was writing to them all the time, and really didn't know what had happened to them.
And you were writing still to Bud Kreuznach, yes?
Yes. Oh, yeah. 'Cause,
Did you hear from them at all?
no.
So describe what was the chateau like?
Oh,
What was your day-to-day life like?
oh. See, that's very interesting because I don't remember all the details. I know all the kids had a job, and I know all the kids had, some people learned how to darn socks, and some of the girls that I was friends with darned socks. And we had to help in the dining room to serve. Oh, I remember this one story. I remember we had, once in a while we got strawberries, and the kids were allowed to serve the strawberries. And so I remember I got this big bowl of strawberries, and I gave one to each of the kids. And I had put one down for myself because I didn't want to miss. So then when I got to the last kid, there wasn't a strawberry. And I think I remember writing that in that diary. I took mine and I gave it to the kid. And I thought that was very generous of me to do that.
Well, at that time it was, because food was at a
You
premium.
know what, I tell you, that was really something very special.
I mean, in your diary, you talk about being hungry and occasionally stealing grapes from the trees, trying to get grapes from the trees. These are things that we take for granted, but clearly were
Yeah.
really vital to you.
Yeah. Can I just tell you about one more thing? And I don't know if I wrote about it in the diary, but to let me know. Anyway, when it was somebody's birthday, we used to, the friends of the person, we used to go to the cafeteria, and we used to borrow a tray, like you get in the cafeteria when you go to lunch. And so we got this tray, and somehow or other we got some doilies, or we made doilies out of paper. And so we hid the tray and we hid the doilies in somebody's locker. We had a locker. And so what everybody did who was in on this birthday surprise, they didn't eat their dessert for 3 weeks. And we saved it, and we put it on the tray. And then on the day or the day before it was the girl's birthday or the boy's birthday, we went and picked a flower from the garden. It was maybe a daisy or something like that. No, it wasn't even a daisy. It was like, what are those weeds called? Dandelion, yes, thank you. It was a dandelion. And so we put it on the tray and we decorated the tray. And then in the morning before the person woke up, we took the tray with all the goodies and we brought it to the person and sang happy birthday to them.
See, so for me, it really shows that there was a deterioration of situation and you didn't have much, so you tried to make do with what you had. And
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we were talking, I said it seemed like you tried to make what was not normal into normal. And you did it the best that you could, my guess is, at the age of 12. But in your diary, I'm just going to read you one quote, because you write about everything daily. You write about things that are happening. You go to Shabbat services because apparently it's an Orthodox
Yes.
religious
Yes.
chateau, or they introduce Orthodoxy into it. And you write, how long is it since I ate a piece of chocolate or a piece of cake? I have a terrible longing. Yes, Papa often said, when you are far away, you will notice how good us parents are. I always laughed at him saying it would be much better, and now I really notice what I said then. I'm learning today how bad this is. How nice it was with my dear parents in Germany. I believe that was the best part of my life, and I was so stupid not knowing how lucky we were. I mean, and at this point you still haven't heard from your parents.
No, yeah.
So at what point do you leave the chateau? What happens?
Okay. We were there for a year, at least a year, and we had gone to school in the town, in the village, and it was, with the farmers, and they had a school for all the kids in the village, and they wanted us to go to school with the village kids. And again, I don't know why the villagers didn't want those kids, the Jewish kids, to mix in with their kids, because we could have taught them so many things about, because some of us had come from big cities and we were, we had been around, and these kids had only been on the farm, and we could have learned a lot from them, so it would have been a good mixture, but they wouldn't allow us to go to school with them either. So we had a French teacher who taught us all about geography, and who taught us about the geography of the United States, and we learned a lot of things from this particular teacher. Okay, so anyway,
Do you remember if you were learning English?
No, we weren't learning anything. No, we had, I still have I was looking for it and was going to bring it to you and show it to you today. I had this Cahier du Jour, and we had all of our lessons written into it. I have to check with you to see if it's at the museum.
I was going to say, you haven't given this to us?
No, I can't find
I
it.
have to
I
check.
can't find it, so I looked for it. So I thought maybe I gave it to the museum. Anyway, no, we had enough to learn everything in French. We had to do math, and we had to do reading and writing, everything in French. So we didn't know any English at all. So anyway, let me just tell you what happened one day. It was in 1941, and the director was a lady, a directrice. She came. Nobody ever got to see her. I only got to see her when you were bad, and I was always a very good person. I never did anything wrong. I always behaved myself. So anyway, what happened was she called me to her office, and I was really very frightened. And I started to walk down it was like a marble staircase, and I came into her office, which was lined in wood, and she was sitting behind her desk and scared. And so she said, "Susie, you're going to go to the United States." So I didn't know what was happening. She said, "Your parents are in the United States, and they had the Hyas, and they had the Quakers, and they had the State Department, and everybody in the United States that they could think of were looking for you." And so then the Germans kept very good records, and the French people kept very good records, and they found us. And they sent us tickets to come to the United States.
And do you remember the trip
Yeah.
and how you felt?
Yeah, I was very excited. I wanted to... I was excited because I knew I was going to see my parents again, because I didn't know whether we had known something was going on in Germany, but remember it was 1941. The concentration camps hadn't really started killing all of those Jewish people. But we knew something horrible was going on in Germany, and so. We didn't know if my parents had gone to a ghetto or a concentration camp. We didn't know. So when I found out that they were there, I was really very happy. So can I tell you something about the trip?
Please, yes.
Yeah. Okay, but you saw that tag in the beginning that you explained, it was that little tag. It was like a tag. It was Eleanor Roosevelt she wanted to help a lot of the children get over here. And evidently, what I found out later, not too long ago, but the children that I came, she had 50 children come on this boat called the Serpa Pinto, and they found room for the two of us, my brother and I, to go with those 50 children on the boat to Serpa Pinto. And this was in Portugal, so we had to go down to south to Marseille, and then we went on the train over the Pyrenees, and then went across Spain, and then went to Portugal, and the capital of Portugal is Lisbon. And so we took the boat from Lisbon, and that was supposed to take us to the United States. It was a Portuguese ship. So this trip, can I tell you about the trip?
Please.
Was like 14 days, and the trip was up and down, up and down. It was a cruise ship, but it wasn't anything like the cruise ships that they have now. It's much smaller. And so the 50 children were assigned to the hull of the ship at the very beginning in the front of the ship, and we weren't supposed to get mixed up with any of the other passengers on the ship. And so anyway, my brother wasn't going to listen to that, so he was all over. He was all over the ship, and he found where they were stashing a whole closet full of fresh pineapple. And we had never eaten any pineapple. And so he kept on eating these pineapple. And I tell you, he spent a lot of time on deck and getting rid of the inside into the Atlantic Ocean.
My guess is he doesn't eat pineapple today.
Yeah, he doesn't. He won't. No.
And what was the mood on the ship? Was the mood good?
Yeah, well, the mood was good because they had told us in 14 days at 6 o'clock in the morning, the night before, they told us that we would pass by the Statue of Liberty. And at 6 o'clock, all the kids, the 50 kids, are very excited, and all the other passengers were excited too. So we were all on the railing of the ship, and it was like 10 minutes to 6, and there was a fog. It was so thick, if you did like this to your hand, you couldn't see. So I tell you, we were really all upset. So, but we stayed up there, and I'm not telling any lies. This is really what happened. This is one of the things in my life that I'm never going to forget. More so than having my children and having my grandchildren. That fog at 6 o'clock lifted like this, like a curtain, like this, and then the Statue of Liberty just came into view, and we saw the whole thing. It was really a very exciting thing because it meant to us, first of all, that we were going to see our parents and that we were going to be in a country where there was no more anti-Semitism and where there were no Nazis, and we were going to be free and we were going to live in a democratic society. So,
Were your parents there to greet you?
my father was there.
And do you remember what it felt like to see him after such a long time?
No, it was wonderful to see him. And so all the people got off the ship, but the kids couldn't get off the ship because the doctor had to get onto the ship, and he had to check us all out to see if he had some kind of a communicable disease. And so he got to my brother, and my brother says he had a big flu, but I'm telling you, he had a big rash on all over his body from eating all that pineapple. and so they saw that, and they said he can't come into the United States. So what were they going to do with him? Does anybody guess what they did with him? Can anybody guess? What's that?
Ellis Island?
Yeah, this lady said Ellis Island. That's right. You know, it's the island right next to the Statue of Liberty. If you couldn't get into the United States, you went to Ellis Island. So they said he can't come. He has to be quarantined until they figure out what's wrong. And I tried to explain to him it was a rash because of the eating all the pineapple. So they put us on Ellis Island, and we found out all about the United States. I'll tell you what we found out. You want to hear?
Yes.
Okay.
You hadn't met your dad yet.
What's that?
You had not met your father yet?
No, they wouldn't let us onto the land, and evidently they must have told my father we were going to Ellis Island, and they would get in touch with him as to what happened. So, okay, so first of all, we used to eat on these long tables, and on the tables they had this white bread and was high like this with slices. We had never seen white bread. And so I took a piece and I squashed it up in my hand and made a little ball, and somebody told me it was called Wonder Bread, and I thought that was really, really great. And then there was, my brother was sitting next to a sailor, and he was drinking this brown drink, and it had bubbles. And the sailor said, "Go take a taste." And my brother looked at me, and I said, "Well, go do it." And so he took it, and he said, "Oh, it tastes really good." And the sailor told him it was Coca-Cola. And then we heard that all the children in the United States could have candy in their mouth and keep it all day long. So we were prepared to come back to get into the United States. So anyway, my brother's rash got better, and they must have gotten in touch with my father, and we got together, and he took us to Washington, where my parents, my mother and the baby were.
We're almost out of time as far as we want to leave some time for questions and answers, but I just want to know briefly if you could describe what was life, do you remember what life was like being reunited with your parents and, getting used to living in the United States?
Well, it was wonderful to be with our parents. It was difficult for me to go to school because they put me in the 7th grade. And is there a 7th grader here by any chance? Oh yeah, I have one. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't know how to speak English too well, and in those days they had homogeneous grouping, which meant they put all the smart kids in one class and the dumb ones in the other one, and all the middle ones in between. And so they put me in that class over there because I didn't know how to speak any English, and all the problem kids were in that class, and I just couldn't believe. But the kids didn't do their homework. Oh, and they chewed gum in the classroom, and I couldn't believe it. And one kid fell asleep in class. I couldn't believe that was going on, because to me, a teacher was the highest thing in the whole wide world next to your parents. But later on, I learned how to speak English, and things got to be a little bit better. But you could, how many of you are students in the school system? Yeah, a lot. Well, I tell you, you're very lucky. Just be happy that you have such wonderful teachers, because in those days, the teachers didn't really understand individual kids, and they didn't understand the needs of an immigrant child. They didn't have like ESOL classes that the kids have today. If you're an immigrant, you get taken out of your class and you learn how to speak English. It was very difficult, and they had a hard time. But eventually everything turned out all right.
Let's open it up to a few questions, and let me repeat the questions so that we can get it in case we're recording the program.
I'd like to know what's happened to that wet money. What happened to the wet money?
What happened to the wet money?
Oh, yeah. I didn't tell you. The lady who took my brother and me across the border, she didn't do it for free. She wanted to have a lot of money, and all of the money that my father had saved, he gave to that lady to take us across the border. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you before.
She smuggled you across the
Yes,
border.
smuggled us, yeah.
What does Joseph do?
Joseph, he's
The question is, what does Joseph do?
Yeah, I can brag about him. He's a cardiologist, and he saved a lot of people, and now he's retired because he's just a year younger than I am. And he used to live in Long Island, but now his wife, his kids are all grown up, and they're doing well, and he's got lots of grandchildren. So he lives in an apartment on top of the, not the Hyatt, one of the fancy hotels. Do you know where the tip of New York is called the Battery? And the tip of New York, what's the name of
The Millennium?
No.
Ritz-Carlton.
Yes, this is a Ritz-Carlton. Oh, you're right. So anyway, on top of the Ritz-Carlton, they have some beautiful apartments with windows that are facing, guess what? That's right. So that's where he lives now in the winter of his life. So he did a lot, and he contributed a lot to the United States. And the other brother, Ernest, the baby, he was physicist for NASA, and some of his experiments went up into space, and he did a lot of work with the ozone in the air. So he contributed a lot to our society, and I mean, and he has lots of children and grandchildren, and so the Nazis didn't accomplish what they set out to do, and they've contributed a lot. But when you think about it, of all those 6 million Jews that they killed, and all of my relatives are in there in that 6 million. Look at all of the things that those people could have given to society.
Correct.
Briefly, how did your parents and your younger brother get to the United States?
Okay, so let me tell you what happened. You remember I told you about that lady who owned a pickle factory? She kept on bugging everybody, the highest, the State Department, anybody she could think of. And so finally she got enough affidavits to get my father. And she promised that he would not be a burden to the United States, that she would take care of him, she would make sure he had a job. And so he had enough papers to just get my father here. So he came here and he started to work. He sold eggs to the Jewish people. He used to buy eggs from farmers, candle them, and then sell them to the Jewish. So he saved enough money so that my mother and the baby could come to the United States. And so when they were all here together, that's when they started looking for us.
Did you have one then more teacher?
Can you repeat the question?
Did you have 2 teachers or 1?
You mean when I was in 7th grade?
Yes.
Yeah, but no, we had more than one teacher. We went from one teacher to the other, but we were together. The class was always together. Let's say one teacher taught us math, but it was all of us together. One teacher taught us reading, another teacher taught us social studies, whatever it was. But I remember later on when I was taking a course in chemistry, and it was a little later. And I knew how to speak English a little bit by then. I just want to tell you about this teacher, and it's never going to happen to you again. I didn't understand it all, and I wanted to please her. And she used to call on me, and I wasn't quite sure. And so one day she said something, and then she said, by that time I was Susan, but she didn't remember my name, so she called me Hilda, and I don't know why, because my last name was Hilsenrath. So anyway, so she called on me, and she said, clear as mud, and of course, I didn't get it. And I said, yes, and all the kids and they laughed at me. So it was a very sad experience that I remember, but, later on, I became a teacher, and I said to myself, I'm never going to do that to my students. So anyway, I learned from her what not to do.
We have a question right here in front.
Did your parents have siblings that were able to leave Germany as well?
My
So the question is, what happened to your parents' extended family?
Yeah. Okay. My grandparents, my father's parents and many of his sisters and brothers except one, they lived in Poland. And in Poland, the Jews didn't even go to the concentration camps, and they didn't go to the ghettos. When the Nazis came into the town, they made them march into the woods, and they made them dig their graves, and they shot them. They fell in through the graves. And on my father's side, I never found anybody that survived except one of his sisters that had left to go to Israel way beforehand. So that I have her. She's a cousin.
So let me just clarify that Susie's father's family was on the eastern side of Poland. And when the Nazis first implemented genocide, they started with this process of killing into open graves. And then they quickly saw that was not going to work. And then towards western Poland, those Jews actually did end up in concentration camps. But again, it was, Susie's correct, that there was this policy of mass shooting first.
So because I tried to find them, and there's no record of them at all. And the Germans kept very good records. Now my mother's parents also lived in Poland, but all of my mother's sisters lived in Germany. They were all German. So, and one of them, I wrote a story about her. Her name was Tante Anna, because she was my mother's aunt. And she took care of my mother, and she was like my grandmother, only she was my aunt. And what happened to her, I found her and her husband and my great-grandmother, who she cared for, and they were killed in Riga. They died in Riga. And all the other aunts, I don't know what happened to them. I never found them. And all of the other relatives, I did not find them. But just lately, the grandchild of Tante Anna sent a letter to the museum, and they said, he said to the museum, "Who is this Susan Warsinger?" He said he didn't know my last name, and it turned out that it was me, and he's my third cousin, so we're writing to each
Found
other.
a relative very much later,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. I'm going to actually ask, we have this tradition to give our speaker the last word. So Susie, I'm going to give the last word to you, but before you leave the auditorium, let me just say that Susie is going to be signing Echoes, which is the publication that the museum produces of survivor volunteers, and many of them who write for do literature, and Susie is part of this program. So you are welcome to go out and visit the table afterwards. Go ahead.
I'm going to read it. Is that okay?
It's fine.
I want my children, my grandchildren, my brothers and their families, my friends, and the visitors here in the audience to rejoice in the fact that we are living in a democratic society, and that all of us should make sure that no dictatorship would ever usurp our liberties. We need to remember the atrocities that happened to families during the Holocaust and pass this information on to our progeny. We need to learn from this horror in our history. We cannot undo the atrocities of the past. But besides remembering, we have to take action to confront hate. When we see injustice taking place, we have to do something about it. We cannot be onlookers. We have to be sensitive to each other, and we have to take care of each other. People ask me, why do I volunteer in this museum? They say, how can you do this over and over? How can I not? Giving tours to our visitors through our permanent exhibit hopefully teaches them what hatred and prejudice can do to people. When touring law enforcement officers and future FBI agents, I hope that they understand their role when encountering atrocities. We cannot be bystanders and definitely not be collaborators. There are threats of genocide in many parts of the world at the present time. We cannot be indifferent to emerging threats of genocide and mass atrocities. All of us need to be aware about what is happening, and we need to work together to take the necessary actions to prevent people from being murdered for the simple reason that they are different. Never again do we want to stand by and do nothing. I want to thank you, Susie Snyder, for helping.
Thank you.
for helping me tell my story. And I want to thank you, the audience, for coming to our museum and being witnesses to the story of the Holocaust and listening to my story. Now, I just want to, how many of you have gone to the permanent exhibit already? How many are going? Well, that's all of many, or most of you. So can I just tell you, when you get up to the 4th floor, that whole 4th floor is my story told over again. So when you see the Nazi soldiers standing in front of the store boycotting, just pretend that's my father's store. And when you see the lady sitting in the park and she's sitting like this, remember how I went through the park and how I wasn't allowed to go to public school. And there really is a lady, their book of their gift pills is also on that floor, and it's under propaganda, the exhibit that's called propaganda. And when you get to the exhibit of the St. Louis, it's a boat. You're going to see this great big boat. And it's a very interesting story. You might really want to read all about that. Make sure that you see the picture of the boat, and that's what the Zeppa Pinto looked like. So I hope you have a wonderful learning experience on the floor, and thank you again for coming to the museum.